Hello, this is an extra briefing on STCDO1 on the essay. Spent quite a bit of time working with students, and and so I've put this video together to give you some extra help. We've got a week to go. So the briefing's on the screen. I'm going to go quite quickly, but obviously you can slow it down and you can look at the text that's on the PowerPoint. So there is briefing available already with loads of links on it to Learning Space. And there's the briefing on the first part, which is about exercise guidelines. And there's a briefing on the second part, which is about supporting clients. Make sure you read those. Those links are there to help you. So make the most of them. I've just cracked out this structure of an essay, which I think is useful, and you might see me making use of in different modules. But increasingly, the students that get the best work follow this kind of formula. It's not my formula, it's a formula that's used in most academic writing. So what I've done is I've taken the liberty of using this format, and then I've put in some ideas for your introduction for the first section, and you should acknowledge the second section in the first introduction. Make it an introduction for the whole essay, but you can see some things on the board on the screen there. Start broad and then get narrow, and then they're not equal sections. The first section be a couple of sentences, middle section 4 or 5 sentences, the bulk of the paragraph, and then the final section is the focus, where you literally just put a sentence. It's not about listing the things that are coming up, but it's that final bit is about what's the focus of the work, to draw the reader from that broad starting point. So why is exercise important? Down into some of the issues, which is almost a list of things that you're going to talk about, but don't describe it as a list, just say these are some of the issues. Show what you know, and then the focus is the second section. In the main body, we want to address several sections. The thing that I've seen so far is that we don't want to get too bogged down in the actual guidelines. Start active, stay active. It's not just a critique of that single guideline. What we're looking at is an exploration of the evidence that underpins the advice that we give to people about how much exercise they should be doing, whether they're a sedentary person looking to do a little bit of activity, or whether they're someone who's quite active and we're looking to get them more active and fitter and more able to take part in sport and to perform at a higher level. So I've put down a few ideas here, but we've got, so you don't have to stick to these, but it would make sense to start off by looking at some of the epidemiology that underpins the physical activity guidelines, and then you can go whichever direction you want. One potential direction is to look at subgroups. So rather than looking at older people and then younger people and moving on and looking at every section, just in one shorter section, a paragraph or two, examine subgroups. So we've got these broad guidelines, but which different groups of people need focus on different elements of these guidelines? Intensity is another topic that could be considered. We start looking at interval training and the things that we can recommend to people. The Biddle and Batteran paper that's listed here, if you look it up on my page, it's got lots of arguments in it, so look at it. You could do a section on strength training, but you don't have to. But if that's your thing and you want to look at strength training and the benefits for health or the benefits for performance, neuromuscular adaptations, rate of force development, all those kind of performance-based factors, then you can start to look at that if you want to. And then sedentary behaviour is another topic. It doesn't necessarily go number 5 after number 4, but if you want to look at sedentary behaviour, then make sure you read this Van der Ploeg paper, which is a debate paper on my site, which covers lots of the critical arguments. The key thing with all of these sections is that you need to introduce the area, cite some evidence that says this is an important area, or evidence that has looked at has done and performed experimental studies and has looked and published work in that area, but then very quickly get on to what some of the arguments are, where are the critical issues, and then make sure you round those up. So what do we take away from that? What are the implications? Second part is all about how we support people in staying more active. So there's some thoughts there on an introduction. Same again, make sure you start broad, focus in. The first part starts with, we know what we should be recommending, but how can we support people one-to-one in becoming more active, changing their exercise regime? And then I've got a few suggestions of areas that you can look at. You don't need to hit all the theories. It would be, I think, better to look at different topics. You can see some up on the screen there. But for each one, there is a bit of a formula to completing it. Don't stick too much to the formula, but make sure you explain what you're talking about. Make sure you make reference to some of the literature that has performed experimental intervention studies or has looked at the underpinning evidence in that area. Then cut to some of the limitations. So look up, for example, just Google, spelt it wrong. Google what's wrong with the trans-theoretical model, or a critique of the trans-theoretical model, and look to see what people have been saying and try and encapsulate those arguments. So in a decent sized paragraph on each one of those, it should be an explanation, some references, and then a critique, and then you round up and explain what the implications are of that knowledge and move on to another one. I've come up with some general advice which I've built from the conversations that we've had in the last few sessions. I've already said it, but try not to focus too much on the actual guidelines. It sounds counterintuitive because the question's about guidelines, but the question is about what are we advising people to do in terms of exercise. And we're using some of the guidelines to critique that. So you can see some advice on the screen. Be cautious of being overly descriptive. If you're spending more than a paragraph or two describing start active, stay active, or if you're spending a whole paragraph describing every element of start active, stay active, your work is too descriptive. So work on those pieces of advice I've just given you about brief descriptions, so we locate what you're talking about and then move on to critical analysis. This is how I work with assignments, but if you're trying to finish one section on something and then move on to the next one, my suggestion is that a better way would be to identify all of these bullet points and to make the arguments clear in the work, and then go back round and then add some more, read some more, add some more, read some more, add some more, keep going back round, keep building it up. That seems like it takes longer, but it doesn't. If you're reading and you're adding small sections, after several revisits of each bit, you'll pretty much have your paragraph that's ready for writing, and the actual writing will have lots and lots more references, it will have lots and lots more critical analysis, and it will be easier to write. You try and write from a blank page to a completed paragraph in an afternoon, it's not going to be as good as if you're reading lots of sources and plugging in the information different places into your essay. Treat them as two mini essays. They're two topics, but make sure the initial introduction is relevant to the whole thing, and make sure the final conclusion is relevant to the whole thing. But if you treat them as two mini essays, it's not more work. It means that your narrative is improved. It means this flow and the explanation and the balance between descriptive and critical work is there, and that's how you'll push on and you'll get 10% more grades from where you would be otherwise. You know, I've got loads of resources. There's loads of stuff on Learning Space, loads of stuff on my website. This is the most resourced essay that I'm involved in. So make the most of it. Take key elements. You don't need to read every article from front to back, but read the abstracts, take the points away, think critical analysis on what are you trying to say. And that, my friends, is my relatively short video on this essay. So good luck.